Mark Carney, a newcomer to politics but a veteran in global finance, has secured a decisive victory in the race to succeed Justin Trudeau as leader of Canada's Liberal Party. On Sunday, party members rallied behind Carney in a sweeping first ballot win at a packed convention in downtown Ottawa, setting the stage for him to become Canada's 24th Prime Minister in a matter of days. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Carney, best known for steering central banks in both Canada and the United Kingdom through turbulent financial crises, now faces an entirely different storm, defending Canada from escalating pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump. His challenge is not just political, it is existential, as Trump's renewed calls for annexing Canada and imposing severe tariffs have thrown Canada into its gravest confrontation with Washington in decades. In his victory speech, Carney struck a defiant tone that drew roaring applause from Liberal delegates. America is not Canada, and Canada never, ever, will be part of America in any way, shape or form, he declared. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. The words signaled the kind of leader Carney intends to be, a fighter, willing to use his economic acumen and global stature to counter a president who has repeatedly tested Canada's sovereignty. Carney's election marks a turning point for Canadian politics. For over a decade, the Liberals under Trudeau struggled with declining popularity, weighed down by years of high inflation, a deepening housing crisis, and voter fatigue after the COVID-19 pandemic. But Trump's dramatic return to power in Washington has reshaped the Canadian political landscape. Suddenly, Liberals have found renewed purpose. Trump's sweeping tariffs on Canadian exports and his inflammatory rhetoric about annexing Canada and Greenland have fueled a nationalist wave across the country. Polls show that Trump has surged to the top of Canadians' list of concerns, surpassing jobs, the economy, and even inflation. With nearly 90% of Canadians living within 150 miles of the U.S. border, the sense of vulnerability has never been more acute. Carney, long seen as a technocrat rather than a populist, is positioning himself as the steady hand needed to navigate what he has called an economic and sovereign crisis. The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country, he warned during his campaign. Think about it. If they succeed, they will destroy our way of life. The leadership transition comes after Trudeau, who has led the Liberals since 2013, announced his resignation earlier this year amid internal party turmoil. Facing a caucus revolt and sinking poll numbers, Trudeau reluctantly stepped aside, though in his farewell address he framed the moment as one of historic consequence. Democracy is not a given. Freedom is not a given. Even Canada is not a given, Trudeau said, his voice heavy with emotion. He urged Canadians to rally behind his successor in the battle to preserve Canada's independence and democratic traditions. For Trudeau, who weathered multiple elections and international crises, the end of his tenure closes a chapter defined by both bold reforms and bitter controversies. But for Carney, it marks the beginning of a high-stakes premiership. Unlike most political leaders, Carney has never held elected office. Instead, his reputation stems from his ability to manage economic turmoil. As governor of the Bank of Canada, he helped stabilize the country during the 2008 global financial crisis. Later, as governor of the Bank of England, he navigated the chaos of Brexit, earning praise as a pragmatic, level-headed leader on the world stage. He has also been a vocal advocate for climate action, serving as the United Nations Special Envoy on Climate and Finance, and once publicly aligned himself with activist Greta Thunberg at Davos, clashing with Trump in the process. His career began at Goldman Sachs, giving him deep ties to global financial elites and institutions from Davos to the G20. These credentials gave Carney an advantage over rivals like Chrystia Freeland, Trudeau's former deputy prime minister, who warned during her campaign that Canada's response to Trump will define us for a generation, and perhaps longer. Ultimately, the Liberal Party coalesced around Carney as the figure best positioned to take on an adversary like Trump. For Canada, Trump looms larger than any foreign leader in living memory. His tariff threats have already sparked retaliatory measures from Ottawa, with Carney promising a dollar-for-dollar response. He has vowed to place Trump on notice about U.S. dependence on Canadian oil, gas, and electricity exports. All cards are on the table, Carney has said, hinting at possible supply cuts if Trump escalates. The trade war, however, risks pushing Canada into a recession, worsening inflation, and deepening the housing affordability crisis that already grips millions of families. But beyond economics lies something more profound: Trump's repeated suggestions that Canada should be annexed or absorbed into the United States. Such rhetoric has outraged Canadians across the political spectrum, fueling anti-American sentiment not seen since the 1960s. Carney has positioned himself as the bulwark against this threat. "I will defend our language, our culture, our water, and our way of life," he pledged during the campaign. His framing resonates with a population increasingly skeptical of U.S. intentions. One of Carney's first major decisions will be whether to call a snap election. Parliament is scheduled to resume on March 24, but Liberals believe they may have momentum now. Trudeau has made clear he will not serve as Prime Minister during any caretaker period, meaning Carney must decide quickly whether to seek his own mandate from voters. Polling suggests a shifting political dynamic. Before Trudeau's resignation, the Liberals trailed the Conservative Party by a staggering 25 points. Now, that gap has narrowed to just 6 points. Trump's aggressive posture has given the Liberals a rallying cry, while Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has been forced to distance himself from the MAGA movement and clarify his positions. The Liberals see an opening to portray Poilievre as Canada's version of Trump, linking his populist economic rhetoric to Washington's brand of nationalism. For Canadians, the stakes could not be higher. Their new leader, though untested in electoral politics, carries the weight of a country on edge. Carney's blend of financial expertise and international credibility makes him uniquely qualified for this moment, but the political test ahead will be unlike anything he has faced before. If he can successfully rally Canadians against Trump's threats, he may usher in a new era of Liberal dominance. If he fails, Canada risks both economic turmoil and an erosion of its sovereignty. In the days ahead, Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister. Whether he immediately triggers an election or not, one thing is certain: his premiership begins in crisis, with Donald Trump as both his first and fiercest adversary. Mark Carney's ascent to Canada's highest office was met with a mixture of hope, anxiety, and intense scrutiny. On the morning after his landslide victory, Ottawa awoke to streets buzzing with reporters, diplomats, and curious onlookers. Parliament Hill, usually serene at this hour, felt electric, its centuries-old stones seeming to hum with the weight of what lay ahead. Carney arrived at Rideau Hall for his first official meetings with senior advisors and civil servants. His office, overlooking the lush grounds of the Governor-General's residence, was lined with the quiet confidence of history. Portraits of past prime ministers stared down at him, silent reminders of the gravity of the role he had assumed. The mood inside the room was sober. Carney had inherited a nation on edge. The U.S., emboldened by Trump's rhetoric, had already begun aggressive moves against Canadian exports. Steel, aluminum, energy, and timber, industries that form the backbone of Canada's economy, were under threat. Carney's first task was not ceremonial, it was existential: to protect the country's economic sovereignty. Even before being sworn in, Carney found himself in the crosshairs of international attention. Washington had issued veiled warnings that Canadian retaliation would be counterproductive. Trump himself had tweeted provocative messages, suggesting that the Great North might be better off in the U.S. fold. Carney, unflinching, prepared a clear message for both domestic and international audiences: Canada would not be intimidated. In private briefings, he emphasized the importance of showing both strength and measured diplomacy. "This is not just about tariffs," he said to his top advisors. "It's about asserting who we are, what we value, and what we will never compromise." His approach drew on decades of experience managing global financial crises. He knew that panic or overreaction could be as dangerous as inaction. The Cabinet Office, usually a place of routine administration, became a war room. Economic models, trade projections, and geopolitical assessments were poured over late into the night. Inside Canada, citizens were watching every move. Farmers in Saskatchewan worried about grain exports. Energy workers in Alberta feared cuts to oil and gas shipments. Manufacturing hubs in Ontario fretted over steel and auto parts. Polls reflected growing anxiety. Canadians were increasingly angry, fearful that Trump's ambitions could destabilize daily life. Carney's early public appearances were deliberately reassuring. He spoke to crowds in Ottawa, Calgary, and Toronto, emphasizing unity, resilience, and vigilance. We face a challenge unlike any in recent memory, he said. But Canada